She called herself Jane. But what she described on the stand left the courtroom in stunned silence. Over the past few weeks, the trial of Sean Diddy Combs has taken a chilling turn, as disturbing allegations from multiple women have come to light. But it was the testimony of one woman, using the name Jane, that may have just changed everything. In emotional and detailed statements, Jane painted a troubling picture of manipulation, control, and twisted relationships hidden beneath the surface of a lavish lifestyle. From what she described as freak-offs at five-star hotels to claims of psychological pressure and recordings of deeply personal moments, her testimony stunned even the most seasoned trial observers. But Jane wasn't the only one to speak out. Others, including former partners and employees, have come forward, each adding a new piece to the puzzle, and what's forming isn't just a scandal, it might be a legacy-shattering reckoning. So what exactly did Jane say? What evidence has surfaced? And what does this mean for one of hip-hop's most powerful and polarizing figures? Let's break it all down, what's been said, what's being claimed, and what the courtroom is still trying to figure out. Who is Jane? She didn't use her real name, and for good reason. Known only as Jane, this witness is one of several women who have come forward in the ongoing federal trial against Sean Combs. According to legal filings, she dated Combs from 2012 to 2016, but what she described in court was far from a normal relationship. From the outside, it looked like a glamorous, high-profile romance. But inside the courtroom, Jane described a deeply toxic dynamic filled with manipulation, fear, and control. Her voice shaking at times, she told jurors that she would often do whatever Combs asked, not out of love, but out of fear that he would leave her, or worse. One of the most unsettling claims? Jane testified that she was repeatedly pressured into participating in what she called freak-offs, private, drug-fueled gatherings where she says Combs would direct her to bring in male escorts while he watched, sometimes recording the encounters. These claims have not been proven in court, but they've sent shockwaves through the media and the music industry alike. Jane explained that during the relationship, she started to lose herself. She found herself doing things she never imagined, just to stay in his good graces. The line between love, fear, and control blurred, and it wasn't until years later that she began to realize how far she had been pushed. But that was just the beginning. Because what Jane revealed next was even more disturbing. Hotel nights and control. Jane called them hotel nights. But the way she described them felt more like carefully orchestrated performances, ones she never truly consented to. According to her testimony, these nights became routine. Expensive suites, closed curtains, hand-selected guests, and an atmosphere she described as numbing. Controlled substances were reportedly used, and Jane claimed that Combs would often direct her on what to wear, how to behave, and, most disturbingly, who to bring into the room. In multiple instances, Jane alleged that she was instructed to find male companions, sometimes strangers, and bring them into these private settings, where Combs would observe, record, or even comment on what was happening. She said she felt more like a pawn than a partner, a tool in someone else's fantasy. And behind it all was a constant, unspoken pressure, keep him happy, or face the consequences. Jane claimed that even when she expressed discomfort, the response was cold, dismissive. She said it was never really about her pleasure or even mutual consent. It was about control. These gatherings weren't rare. Jane testified they happened regularly, and often followed the same script. Some nights, she said, were hazy, fueled by substances and emotional exhaustion. Others were terrifyingly clear. In one chilling moment, Jane told the court she began researching what the word cuckold meant, because it kept coming up during these so-called freak-offs. She wanted to understand what role she was being pushed into, and why it made her feel so empty afterward. Still, despite her confusion and growing emotional pain, she stayed. Because leaving, she said, felt more dangerous than staying. But then came the breaking point, an incident so disturbing that even the courtroom fell silent when she described it. The breaking point and emotional collapse. For years, Jane said she endured the emotional roller coaster, fighting to hold on to the man she thought she loved while slowly losing pieces of herself. But one night, according to her testimony, everything shattered. She didn't give all the details. She couldn't. But what she did say left a lasting impression. She described waking up with bruises she didn't remember getting, and a deep, aching sense of regret. It was a night, she told the jury, that made her realize she was no longer safe, not physically, not emotionally, and certainly not spiritually. Jane claimed she tried to talk to Combs about what had happened. She said she wanted to understand, to make sense of it. But instead, she said he dismissed her concerns and shifted the blame. That's when she began recording voice notes, desperate attempts to capture what was happening in real time, afraid that no one would believe her otherwise. In one recording played for the court, Jane could be heard asking Combs to seek help. She told him he needed rehab. In response, he reportedly laughed, and referred to her as his crack pipe, a phrase that seemed to horrify even the most jaded courtroom observers. It was a moment that encapsulated the power imbalance, the denial, and the emotional damage she said had become her daily reality. She testified that her health began to deteriorate during this period. Panic attacks, depression, isolation. She stopped recognizing the person she saw in the mirror. And yet, she stayed, convinced she couldn't survive outside of that toxic world. But eventually, she did walk away. And it's that decision, she says, that gave her the strength to testify years later, in a courtroom packed with reporters and lawyers, finally telling her side of the story. Her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. But her words landed with force. And just when it seemed her story couldn't get any darker, someone else came forward, with video proof. Video evidence and witnesses. Jane's story was deeply unsettling, but it wasn't the only account presented to the court. Soon after her testimony, others began stepping forward. And one of them brought something no one expected: video evidence. A former hotel security guard, whose name was not disclosed to protect his safety, testified that he witnessed a violent altercation between Sean Combs and singer Cassie Ventura back in 2016. According to his statement, the incident was captured by a hotel surveillance camera. What's more shocking? He claimed that Combs later paid $100,000 to obtain that footage, allegedly to make sure it never saw the light of day. The court hasn't confirmed whether the video will be publicly released or officially entered into evidence, but its existence, and the alleged payout, has raised serious questions about what Combs may have been trying to hide. But it didn't stop there. Another woman, Brianna Bongolan, also testified. She claimed that in the same year, Combs dangled her over the edge of a hotel balcony during an argument. Her story was raw and emotional, but the defense quickly pointed out inconsistencies in her timeline. The legal team for Combs argued that the dates she mentioned didn't align with travel records, attempting to discredit her account. Still, the judge allowed the testimony to stand. Why? Because despite the timeline gaps, her claims echoed a disturbing pattern already forming through multiple testimonies: stories of emotional control, physical intimidation, and a lifestyle built on secrecy and silence. Cassie Ventura's story added even more weight. In her previous civil case, settled for an undisclosed sum, she alleged years of abuse, surveillance, and emotional torment. The federal trial is separate, but the core of her claims mirror those now unfolding in court. As more voices joined the narrative, the prosecution began painting a clearer picture: one man, multiple women, and a long trail of trauma, coercion, and fear. But what exactly are the charges Combs is facing? The full list might shock you. The charges that could end it all. As shocking as the testimonies have been, it's the charges themselves that reveal the full scope of what Sean Diddy Combs is facing, and they go far beyond any one accusation. According to the federal indictment, Combs is currently being tried under a wide-ranging set of charges that include racketeering, sex trafficking, kidnapping, forced labor, money laundering, arson, and obstruction of justice. These are not minor accusations, they are the kind typically reserved for large-scale criminal enterprises. Prosecutors allege that Combs didn't just engage in abusive behavior, but operated what they describe as a criminal network, one that used his fame, wealth, and influence to recruit and control vulnerable individuals. Jane, Cassie, and others are being presented as part of that network's fallout, people who, according to the prosecution, were manipulated and exploited behind the scenes of his global success. In short, they're not painting him as a man who simply made mistakes, they're presenting him as the alleged leader of a secret, systemic operation. The defense, on the other hand, has pushed back hard. They argue that these claims are exaggerated, opportunistic, and in some cases, fabricated. They've accused certain witnesses of chasing fame or financial settlements. Combs himself has pled not guilty to all charges, maintaining that any interactions were consensual and that the government is attempting to ruin his legacy. If convicted, Combs could face multiple decades in prison, and in some cases, depending on how the charges stack, life behind bars. This isn't just about reputational damage. It's a battle for his future, his freedom, and everything he's built over the past 3 decades. But the legal fight is far from over. As the trial continues, it's not just the charges or the evidence that people are watching, it's also how Combs is holding up under pressure. Because behind the courtroom doors, his carefully curated image is beginning to crack. The man behind the fame, Combs in court. For years, Sean Diddy Combs seemed untouchable, one of the most influential figures in music, fashion, and business. But inside that courtroom, the spotlight hits differently. And according to reporters, the confident mogul we've seen in music videos and red carpets now looks very different, quiet, tense, and, at times, visibly shaken. Combs has been denied bail and remains in custody as the trial unfolds. Each day, he sits in silence while former partners, employees, and associates describe moments that contradict the public persona he worked so hard to build. During jury selection, court observers noted that Combs appeared distracted, often glancing around the room or shifting in his seat. One source described him as looking restless, like someone who's used to being in control, but now isn't. His legal team, comprised of top defense attorneys, is doing everything possible to discredit the witnesses, challenge the timeline of events, and portray the accusations as either distorted or false. But even with skilled representation, the weight of the allegation seems to be taking a toll. And perhaps most telling is how little Combs has said, both inside and outside the courtroom. Once known for his bold statements and flashy image, he's now silent. No press conferences. No emotional pleas. Just short statements through his attorneys, maintaining his innocence. That silence is loud. And to many watching the case unfold, it signals a man under enormous pressure, facing the possibility that everything he's built could come crashing down. But the trial isn't over yet. There are still weeks of testimony ahead, more witnesses to be called, and potentially new evidence waiting to be revealed. So what happens next? And will there be a moment that finally tips the scale, for or against him? What comes next? The future of the trial. As of now, the trial is expected to continue through late June and possibly into July. With each passing day, more witnesses are being scheduled to testify, some of whom, according to court insiders, may include additional former partners and industry insiders with first-hand knowledge of Combs' private world. Prosecutors are reportedly preparing to introduce further financial records, travel logs, and possibly even communications that could strengthen their claims of a coordinated and long-running pattern of exploitation. Meanwhile, the defense team is preparing to counter every claim, aiming to paint the allegations as exaggerated or strategically timed. They've also hinted at presenting character witnesses who will testify to Combs' generosity, mentorship, and contributions to music and culture. Jury dynamics are another factor. With such an emotionally charged case, and intense media coverage, judges and attorneys alike are being careful to avoid influencing jurors through theatrics or leaks. The court has enforced tight controls on the release of new evidence to the public, making it harder to separate rumor from reality. But despite those restrictions, the internet has been buzzing. Social media is flooded with speculation, outrage, support, and debate. Some fans still defend Combs, insisting he's being unfairly targeted. Others say the testimonies are too consistent, and too painful, to ignore. One thing is clear, whatever the final verdict, this case has already left a permanent mark on the legacy of Sean Diddy Combs. The industry he helped shape is now forced to reckon with the shadows that may have existed behind the fame. Conclusion: a legacy on trial. Fame, money, and power may protect you from many things, but not from the truth. Over the past few weeks, the trial of Sean Combs has peeled back the layers of a man once seen as untouchable. Behind the polished brand and the platinum records, testimony after testimony has painted a picture of control, fear, and secrecy. Whether these stories result in conviction or acquittal, the narrative around Diddy has already changed, perhaps forever. As more facts emerge and the courtroom drama unfolds, the world will be watching, not just to see what happens to one man, but to understand how someone so powerful for so long may finally be held accountable. And while the final verdict still lies ahead, one thing is certain: this is no longer just a trial, it's a reckoning. Backhand index pointing down. What do you think? Do the testimonies seem credible to you? Is Diddy being targeted or exposed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want updates as this case unfolds, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter.